Just picture in your mind a beautiful hiking trail in Hawaii. It overlooks the water, there's greenery everywhere. Simply put, it's just beautiful. But what if I tell you it's also the scene where this doctor allegedly tried to murder his own wife? I'm Elizabeth Millner with Law&Crime. Dr. Gerhardt Konig was on the run for more than 6 hours. But was this an accident or pre-planned and intentional? Well, you have a rock involved, syringes, and then you flee the scene. It's hard to say it was an accident. We don't have to go back very far for this case. It happened this past Monday. Dr. Gerhardt Konig and his wife Ariel were on a popular hiking trail in Hawaii, the Windward Oahu hiking trail on the island of Oahu. And it's not like these two were on vacation. They lived in Hawaii. Dr. Konig was a doctor, a renowned anesthesiologist, and according to LinkedIn, a partner at the Anesthesia Medical Group in Maui since 2023. His wife Ariel also had an impressive resume. She had a background in nuclear engineering. So if you're going off the appearance of social media, it seemed they had it all. Great jobs, they lived in Hawaii. It appeared picture perfect until everything came to light on Monday. So what happened on Monday? Like I mentioned, the couple were on a hiking trail bright and early. Then Gerhardt allegedly attacked his wife. Did it come out of nowhere? Well, not necessarily. The reason behind the alleged attack, to me at least, just doesn't make sense. Police say the alleged attack started after Ariel refused to take a picture with him. It's puzzling, right? But it only got worse from there. Police say Gerhardt hit his wife over the head with a rock, not once, but allegedly multiple times. And according to a report by Hawaii News Now, he allegedly pricked his wife with syringes. It's unclear what was in the syringes or why he allegedly had syringes on a hiking trail. He's a doctor, sure, but still doesn't look too good. And what also doesn't look too good is Dr. Konig allegedly just left his wife on the trail, leaving her behind. He didn't even stay to call 911. He ran, literally. He allegedly took off on foot. Officers were alerted to the case after witnesses called 911 to report a man was beating a woman on the trail. Ariel was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. She reportedly suffered from serious head injuries and multiple injuries to her face. But she was able to tell detectives who attacked her and left her there to almost die. She says it was her husband. Police spent hours looking for him, and they were rushing to find him, even putting out this wanted poster that says the Honolulu Police Department is asking for the public's assistance in locating Gerhardt Konig of Maui. Konig was on Oahu with his wife this morning when he attempted to push her off a hiking trail and struck her in the head with a rock. He was last seen near the Pali Lookout and was wearing a light gray shirt and blue shorts and carrying a black bag. Then, a little more than 6 hours later, a spotting of Dr. Konig. He reportedly was still on foot. There was a brief chase, but he was arrested. At the time, charges were pending, but it's been reported he could face attempted second-degree murder. But again, still pending right now. So what does his job have to say about the allegations? Dr. Konig is employed by an independent entity contracted to provide medical services at various medical facilities on Maui, including Maui Memorial Medical Center. Dr. Konig's medical staff privileges at Maui Memorial Medical Center have been suspended pending investigation. Maui Health takes these concerns and the safety of its patients very seriously and will cooperate with authorities as appropriate. It's unclear if Dr. Konig's wife is still in the hospital, but the allegations against him left his friends and coworkers stunned. One coworker described to Island News that he was quiet and friendly. Former neighbors and friends reported the same and told KDKA-TV that the couple were friendly. As of this reporting, Dr. Konig's medical license is in good standing, but like I mentioned, he's been suspended from his job. It's unclear what will happen next, as now prosecutors are weighing what to charge him with. I'm joined now by retired NYPD detective and co-host of the Gold Shields podcast. That's Tom Smith. Tom, always great to see you, and thank you so much for joining me. What's your reaction to this really startling case?
Yeah, it's pretty bizarre. The actions themselves are just horrifying of what happened to this woman, this wife of this guy. But me looking at it from the perspective of a detective, there's a lot more to this than I think is being shown right now or being released right now. And part of that is, in all the years of working, high crimes and all that, you rarely see just an absolute snap of someone because they're not taking a picture. And not taking a picture and launching your wife off a cliff and trying to bash her head in with a rock is a little much for a just instinctive reaction to something. Me looking at this as a detective, I am going way back into this guy's history and checking every type of social media accounts he has, who's he talking to, Google searches of what he's, checking out and researching to see if there was a premeditation to this. And this is just what happened and it set him off. But there's a lot more to this, I think, as far as a history goes, than just the act that happened.
A big thank you to Odoo for sponsoring us. Odoo is an incredible all-in-one business management software that provides you with a range of applications. Now, one of my personal favorites is Odoo's website builder. With their drag and drop features and AI copywriter, it helps me come up with website descriptions, like the site I built for my cat Buttons. It's pretty easy to set up, and just a couple minutes later, I now have buttonsthecat.com. So again, a huge thank you to Odoo for sponsoring our news stories, and you can build your website now as well. The domain is free for the first year when you use our link, odoo.com/lcnewsweb. Again, that's odoo.com/lcnewsweb for a free domain for your first year. Yeah, and it's interesting you say that too, because when we talk about whether or not it's an accident or possibly intentional, it feels like it's leaning a little bit more towards intentional and even possibly planned, given that syringes were involved. Now, if you're on a beautiful destination, you're out hiking, why the need for syringes? So what's your reaction, and do you think that this was possibly planned out?
Yeah, I believe it was because, even going to the extent of where did they hike to? The height, did that play a role in it of where he picked, this destination to be? And hopefully down the line, the wife is able to give an interview about, their history, what's going on with their marriage, and also interviewing family members and friends about what their views of their marriage was. Was there any problems? Was there any violence that just didn't get reported? That happens a lot in domestic issues as well. Just because there's no reporting doesn't mean nothing happened. So these are all avenues that this investigation is certainly going to go into. But the syringes, as you brought up, Elizabeth, is very concerning because that is an absolute premeditation in and of itself. And what was in those syringes is going to play a big part in this.
Yeah, and I'm very curious to know what was in those too, and I'm sure down the line we'll definitely learn a lot more. In terms of police investigating a case like this, out in what I imagine to be just kind of an open area out in Hawaii and a trail, probably more likely secluded than not, how do police come up with determinations when it comes to charging cases like this? It's been reported that Dr. Konig is possibly facing an attempted second-degree murder charge, but how do police come up with and determine these types of things in an investigation like this?
Yeah, a lot of it is working backwards. Like I stated, with his social media accounts and his Google searches and past history, that's all going to play a role in this. And the syringes, again, not to bring it up again, but that is going to lead to a determination of premeditation because of what was in there. You're not just bringing two syringes filled with something on a hiking trip with your wife. That's not the norm. And then the possibility of him trying to use them, at the time of the attack is playing. All of this is going to play into this, and it raising to a second degree, possible attempted murder charge might be Hawaii's premeditation with the second degree. So that is what I mean by, what did detectives uncover when it came to this case?
Yeah, and when you have the syringes and then also this other tidbit that he ran away afterwards, that kind of plays into also a little bit of conscience of guilt. Now, again, these are allegations. We don't know the full extent just yet, but it does kind of not seem good on Dr. Konig's part to run away on foot by that and just leave his wife to die on a hiking trail, allegedly. What do you make of him just running away?
Yeah, you know what? When it comes to injuries, the first thing all of us would do is call 911 or try to get help, if it was an accident. And that wasn't the case here. He was fleeing the scene, getting out of that area any way he could. But good police work, prevented that and they got him. But, again, when you're talking about one specific case, Elizabeth, there's so much more that goes into it on the investigative level. And every faction of what he did plays a role in the determination of how the investigation runs. So it's kind of put into a timeline of what happened, when it happened, and the evidence that they collected from, the investigation that leads to a whole umbrella when it comes to this kind of case.
Yeah. And, when you're investigating a case like this, especially involving domestic violence and partner on partner type of crime, in your opinion, are those harder to investigate than, a stranger on stranger crime?
Well, it is because the fear factor of being silent always plays a role in it. Domestic issues are really tough because there's one part of that relationship scared enough not to say anything. And if nothing is said, it's hard to prove when you don't have a witness or a complainant in a case when it comes to a domestic assault. So all of that, those factors are difficult when so much fear or intimidation plays a role in a domestic issue.
And I'm sure it was terrifying for Dr. Koenig's wife to kind of tell investigators it was my husband who had hit me over the head with this rock, allegedly. I still have to say that. But how delicate do investigators have to be when they do speak with Dr. Koenig's wife or any victim of a domestic violence situation?
Yeah, you have to be very delicate. And the positive part in this case is he's in jail, so there's no rush. You let her heal. You let little investigative roles take their run at her, and let her kind of talk on her own terms on her timeline. With healing, and there's a lot of healing that she's going to have to go through, not just physically, but certainly mentally. So you have to take your time because you want to get the right information. You don't want it clouded by a defense attorney saying, well, she was on medication when she said that, or she was in the hospital and stressed out. So all of those investigative techniques have to play a role in this, with really taking your time and getting the right information from the key witness who's the victim in this.
And I want to go back to a point we had talked about earlier in our discussion, just about what could have been the motive, whether or not this was an escalation, whether or not he just snapped while they were out on that trail. But what do you think just about the reports that, Gerhardt's wife refused to take a photo with him, and that kind of led him into allegedly bashing her head with a rock? Then the syringes come into effect. What do you just make of the whole photo aspect?
Well, as an outsider looking in, not buying it. Sorry, it doesn't make any sense. I've been involved in thousands of assaults, and numerous homicides and stuff, and that's never the case when people proclaim that it was just a snap and this happened. It never works out that way. There's always a compelling factor when it comes to the actions of the suspect when it comes to cases like this, and I think this is, right up that alley. Him losing his job. Again, what was their relationship like? It's all going to come out at some point, and it's probably going to come out from the victim, which is going to be the compelling factor in this.
Yeah, and I think she'll be a very compelling witness as well, too, especially because I can only imagine just how terrifying it was if she didn't see it coming, if she didn't know what was about to happen, just the imagery of it, the head, or bashing the head with the rock, the syringes. It's just a terrifying thing to kind of imagine. At the very most, we're possibly looking at attempted second-degree murder. Do you think at the very least they have enough for just an assault charge, just to kind of make something stick?
Oh, certainly they have that because they spoke to the wife on probably at some point to get the initial charge on him, and then you can always add charges as you go with the collection of evidence and the collection of statements. So I'm sure that's what happened in this case, but they certainly have enough to hold him, which they're doing, and then the investigation is going to continue. More evidence is going to come in, and more witness statements from whoever might have been in that area, maybe seen what happened, and a background investigation as well with family members and friends. So all that, leans into the investigation and it ongoing, even though he's already under arrest.
And, being in an interrogation room many of times, being the one to ask the questions, I should say, what do you think it'll be like to interrogate, a doctor like this?
Yeah, you know what? It's just like everybody else. You go about him the same way you would in any assault case or homicide case or attempted murder case that you're going to do. You just methodically have your line of questioning set up. You have your partner and you on the same page with how you're going to ask questions, who's going to ask what questions, and then depending on the interview, when to push a little bit or when to pull back a little bit, depending on, what's being said and what's going on at the time. That is, if he doesn't lawyer up, and invoke his right to do so and have the detectives able to speak to him. But that'll all play out as well.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if, we can get our hands on what the interrogation could look like, even some body-worn camera, and see where this investigation, kind of what all happened during those moments. Tom Smith, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Before we sign you off, though, what do you think will happen next?
Oh, I'm interested in keeping up with this case because it's just one of those that just, piques your interest in how a in-depth investigation has to run. So I'm really interested to see, like you said, the interview, if that's possible, if they do conduct one, and the interview of the wife and her statements and her medical condition going forward. So I'm certainly looking forward to keeping up with this and see what the outcome is.
Yeah, and we'll see where the outcome leads, where the charges lead as well, too. Tom Smith, again, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Elizabeth. Thanks so much.
Dr. Gerhardt Konig still at this time remains in custody. At the time of this recording, his charges were still pending. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.